We're going to start with some very gentle yoga asana, pranayama and mudra. So I would invite you, first of all, to get into a seated wide leg forward fold position. So with the legs spread apart and the pelvis slightly tipped forward, the shoulders, just round the shoulders a few times to kind of like get into the neck, maybe get into the head a little bit. Just find your seat here. And then instead of the feet flexing, I invite you to just let them kind of flop, because rather than being flexed in a very masculine energy, I just invite you to flop the feet forward. So point the toes like this to invite the feminine in. Take a few breaths here and then just gently allow the spine, the neck, the head to softly fold over. And then if you feel comfortable, slowly shut down the eyes. Take the ring finger and the thumb of each hand and take the mudra, this earth mudra, and then either rest it on top of the legs, let it fall out in front of you, the back of the hands rest against the ground. Start to notice the breath. As you inhale, the belly expands. As you exhale, contracts towards the spine. So in our physical practice today, we're going to touch upon what are known as the 3 granthis. These granthis are knots within the esoteric body. And these are blockages of prana that run up the Sushumna Nadi, the energy channel of the spine. So in order to release and open up to new ideas that we will cover in this theoretical side of the course, we first need to let go, release, and allow prana to move freely up and down the chakra system, the spine. So as you keep breathing and maybe fold deeper into the pose here, we open up the Muladhara chakra. This is the root chakra. Maintaining the mudra with the ring finger, touching the thumb, placing the hands wherever they are. I'm going to take about another minute here. And this first granthi, this first knot, is known as the Brahma granthi. And here is where the tension that we hold here is all about safety. It's all about fear of losing our home, losing our history, our kind of like real core identity. So when holding on to this, we're holding on to fundamentals really, but we're also holding on to a certain element of fear here, fear of shifting, fear of change, very subtle change within the environment, change within your current environment, your current situation. Keep deeply breathing here. Really start to feel into the pelvis. Feel the atoms in the hips start to have a certain quality of spaciousness between them. Feel the atoms in the esoteric body around this lower region start to vibrate and bounce off each other with every breath, every inhale, every exhale. Feel that space being created and feel that granti, that knot loosening here. I invite you to activate the Mula Bandha. This is a lock that is activated by tensing the sex organs. So if you're a woman, if you identify as a woman, then you're going to be clenching the inner walls of the vagina, and if you're a man, then it's the male sex organs. So activating here and just holding as if it's also as if you're like going to the loo, going to the toilet. And really feel the energy, lock here and move upwards. So as you breathe, the energy, the prana is moving up through the esoteric body, the Sushumna Nadi, the spine. A few more breaths here. And then when you're ready, slowly roll up through the spine and come to a seated position, Sukhasana, with the legs crossed easily. Bring the hands one on top of the other. You might want to interweave the fingers like a little basket. If you identify with feminine energy, I invite you to place the left thumb on top of the right. If you identify with a male energy, the opposite way. Let this mudra which balances the hormones, just sit in the lap here. Close down the eyes softly and continue the breath. A steady breath. Here we find ourselves still in the Brahma Granthi area, but we are here activating the Svadhisthana chakra. This is an area where, when in balance, is abundant in creativity, in sexuality and freedom. But when out of balance, we can become quite tense, anxious, overwhelmed. So sit here with the eyes soft or closed, still bringing attention to the breath as it flows down the Sushumna Nadi, the spinal column on the inhale, and then up the Sushumna Nadi on the exhale. And this mudra that we're taking here, this mudra is Ushas mudra. And although we'll not be staying for 16 minutes here today, if you did want to take this mudra to the next level, then they say that by holding this for 16 minutes a day, you will regulate the hormonal channels in the body. Now we move on to the Vishnu Granthi. As we locate ourselves in the Manipura chakra, this is around the abdominal region. So release the mudra of the hands and then uncross the legs, extend the legs forward. I invite you to bend the right leg and just simply place the right foot, the right sole of the foot over, and it sits on the outside of the left thigh. Raise the left arm up, bend the elbow and twist towards the right hand side. Now you might be here, you might be here, you might actually have your leg bent like this. Wherever you are, that's fine. The aim here is to just twist and bring that samana vayu, the circular digestive motion, into play here. Think of this as wringing out a cloth. This is visually, potentially looks a little tighter, but actually we're just really quenching all of the negativity in our nervous system out by doing this. Here, I invite you to start to breathe with what we call Satali Pranayam. Satali Pranayam is taken by rolling the tongue, if that is accessible to you, or pursing the lips. On the inhale, either inhale through curled tongue or pursed lips. Hold and close the mouth, and then exhale through the nose. This is a very cooling breath as we come to this area of where the Agni is present, the Pitta dosha is located around these regions, the digestive area. We want to cool this down. We want to relieve this. Tap into the feminine, embrace the feminine here by adding this cooling breath. Still twisted toward the right hand side. And I invite you to uncross the legs, come back into a neutral position with the legs out in front. And now this time swap sides. So we bend the left leg and bring the left sole of the foot to the outside of the right thigh. Raise the right arm, the right hand, bend the elbow and twist towards the left hand side. Again, you can bend the right knee. You can just simply hold, really nourish and nurture this left bent leg towards your side. Wherever feels most comfortable for you. Remember that the focus here is this twisting action and to flow with the samana vayu, that circulating, twisting flow of prana. Continuing with the breath, the Satali Pranayam. Cooling breath. Now, as you continue to breathe with the cooling breath and you're twisting, can you activate the Mula Bandha by clenching the sex organs? And also, can you activate the Uddiyana Bandha? This is done by sucking the abdomen in and up. So it could be quite confusing and it could take a few times to practice, but these locks are really important in releasing the granthis. So that's a kind of like holding of the perineum as if you're wanting to go to the toilet and then sucking in and up. So you're really just imagining this prana going up, lifting everything in yourself up, opening the sternum, the clavicle, the shoulders. A few more cooling breaths here. And then slowly come back around with the legs straight in front of you. Now cross the legs and roll over the knees into a hands and knees position. Oh, my cat has joined me here. Hello, Angus. My cat has 3 legs. We love him. And then we want to come into Anahatasana now. So this will open up the Anahata chakra. And we're still in the Vishnu Granthi here. So we're still in this region of the body. So I invite you to extend the arms forward, keep the hips lifted. And bow the head towards the ground as you melt towards the ground. Now, I would offer that you take a Padma Mudra, hands come into a lotus position here. So it would kind of look like this if you're in Anahatasana, you've got this mudra. Bring the hands together and just hold that in front of you. I'm going to come out of the pose now, but please stay in the pose. Please let the chest move towards the ground. And if the heart space is particularly a space that feels tight within your body, you might want to internally repeat the bija mantra, YAM, Y-A-M, YAM. Gently breathing with a regular breath. If you still would like to carry on with the Satali Pranayama cooling breath, of course, continue. But also feel free to just let the breath go. Whatever feels best for you. We're going to stay here for another couple of minutes, so really get yourself settled into the pose. Deeply breathing. So whereas the last Granthi, the Brahma Granthi, was all about, fear of death, fear of lacking shelter, clothing, and a general fear of lacking the earth and lacking grounding. This Vishnu Granthi is what about the fear of being ignored? It's a very egoic Granthi. We're clinging to our ego here, and we're kind of in a quest here when this is really tight to live up to society's expectations. We don't want to, we just want to be seen and fit in. So by taking this Anahatasana pose and letting the heart open up, we're really opening up ourselves to compassion, love, and kindness. This last minute, I'm going to join you in this pose, so everyone who's watching on a recording is aware of what we're doing. Slowly make your way up, back onto hands and knees. You might want to, if you're not facing the front of your mat, swing around, but if you are, that's fine. Crawl the knees slightly forward, and then sit back onto the heels in Virasana Hero pose. And here, we're going to take 6 lion's breath. And now we move up to the Rudra Granthi, and we're moving up to the Vishuddha chakras. So these lion's breaths are really just going to release anything and open up this space, this throat space. So I invite you to let the palms just rest down or wherever they fall on the knees. Just know that that's wherever they were meant to be. Just let them rest and relax. And maybe roll the shoulders again. Let the scapulae drop down the back. And then we take 6 of the lion's breath. So we inhale through the nose and then out the mouth. Inhale. Out the mouth. Regulate the breathing. Just sit in stillness. Feel the opening of the throat. Notice any qualities you might have just released. Finally, we move to the Ajna chakra. This is the second to last chakra, but it's the tip of the Rudra Granthi. So here, invite you to take the hands in Anjali Mudra in prayer, and then bring the back of the thumbs up to the third eye, the center of the brows. Now, I invite you to sit here for a few moments and just think about, bring to mind all of the things that you really wish that you could let go of in life, which intellectually you might have let go of, but esoterically you might have struggled to let go of. That being that you know you should let go of that thing, but you just can't, you know? This practice, these practical asanas, breathing techniques, pranayama, these mudras will really help you to be able to, on a practical level, digest all the information that comes your way, whether it be through this course, whether it be through stuff you read about that you find interesting and really touches a point in you. We all know that we sometimes, as teachers even, we don't practice necessarily what we preach. Well, this is an opportunity to really practice what you preach. The hands still, the thumbs still pressed against the center brow in the Anjali Mudra prayer position. Now I'm going to do a chant, and this is a chant that will invoke this loosening of the granthis. And it's in Sanskrit, so I'm gonna call it out, and I will leave I'll leave a little bit of space in between the lines, just for if you want to repeat it to yourself. I know that I think everyone's muted here, and also if you're at home, just feel free, just try and go along with, even if it's a mumble that you're letting out here as I chant, try and kind of like mimic or copy what I'm saying and join in. So Supta Guru Prasadena, Supta Guru Prasadena, Yara Jagarti Kundali, Yara Jagarti Kundali, Tara Saravani Padmani, Tara Saravani Padmani, Bihidyanti Granteo Picha, Bihidyanti Granteo Picha. I'll repeat this one more time all together. So again, if you feel like you can even hum along with this, then I invite you to do so. Supta Guru Prasadena, Yara Jagardi Kundali, Tada Saravani Padmani, Vidyanti Granteo Picha. Take a deep inhale. Exhale out the mouth. And then that little short passage was taken from the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. It's the third chapter and the second verse. So if anyone would be interested in that, then it's translated roughly as when the dormant Kundalini is aroused by the benevolent grace of the Guru, then alone all the Padmas, the lotus to chakras, and the Granthi, the knots, are opened. So that's basically saying that when we bring all the energy up through the spine and just really power through all those blockages, then we are free. I will give you a few moments now to get into a comfortable position, whether that's lying on your bed, whether you're in Balasana, child's pose, whether you're surrounded by cushions, whatever position you may choose to be in. I invite you to come into this now, and I will pass over to Rihanna. Thank you very much.
So I'm actually just going to leave this screen up for a few moments. And that's obviously, you can pause this if you're on this recording. And this is just in case you're not familiar with the dosha. These are kind of the primaries to what we'll be discussing on a kind of Ayurvedic level. We need to just know this fundamental information about these groups of elements. And if you don't know about the dosha, it is believed that each person starts with a birth prakruti. So we might be dominant in kapha, or dominant in pitta, or dominant in pitta and vata. We all have all of these elements aside of us, and that's how our body moves and thinks and aspires. But we tend to have a dominance in one of these or a couple of these from birth, and that can decide some things about us from our birth. It can decide on things like our body and our facial features. It can decide on our personality and some things that we might be more likely to want to do in our lives or to suffer from in our lives. But along the way, we can also get an imbalance. So we can get an imbalance of any of these doshas. We take the doshas in every day. We take them in through our lifestyle. We take them in through our diet. We take them in through experiences we have with others, our relationships. So here's just a chance to have a little look through these. Maybe one of them seems to sit quite well with you. Maybe one of them feels, you feel like a little bit of a connection with. Maybe that's your dosha or something that is part of you. So I'll just leave you a few minutes to sit with that, and leave anyone who wants to go to the loo or get a little drink. So I'll just leave you with this for 1 minute. Okay, so before we get started, I'm just going to introduce myself quickly again for the people watching the recording. So I am Rihanna. I am an Ayurvedic practitioner working in Sheffield, UK. And I'm particularly interested in this subject because I've had an eating disorder in my past. And I do believe that the root of many eating disorders is a kind of societal fat phobia. It affects, all of our bodies in different ways, depending on the kind of body that you're living with. but it does affect us all and is a very important and very under talked about subject. I probably shouldn't share this information, but just for example, I was actually talking to my mom about it, and she said that she was speaking to a friend, and her friend said, "Oh yeah, I'm fat phobic." And yeah, I learned it off my family, yeah. And so I still feel like it's something we kind of we might not we might not be aware of, but I think a lot of us kind of just take it as quite a common normal thing to kind of be against fatness, be yeah, unaccepting of fatness. And yeah, so in this session, really what I want to do is start to explore the roots of that and why that might be. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how I see our society, our culture that we're in, our kind of Western or global Northern kind of culture, and how that is affected by the doshas. So, what's going on a doshic level in our society? So, obviously, we see the elements around us in the nature very clearly, the water, the earth, the fire. But when we get to our actual culture, what's going on in our relationships, what's going on in our governments, we can talk about the doshas from this perspective as well. So, we're in a pitta dominant society. Now, how do we see that around us? Well, some of these pictures you may kind of relate to. Um, it essentially means that pitta is dominating our culture. So some cultures are more dominant in another dosha. So if you look across kind of South India, Southeast Asia, we have a little bit more dominance in Kapha dosha, and this is a little bit climactic. So in very warm countries, we need to keep the body cool. So through the generations, people who have kept the body a little bit cooler by taking in cold nature from the outside, so cold in quality foods, cold experiences, etc., have survived better. So their whole dosha becomes a little bit more dominant in kapha. So we get a kind of kapha domination. Whereas in this culture, it's very cold, very cold in this country, and we do change in temperature. We have seasons. So this all affects us. And actually, the human body really does need to keep itself warm in this culture, just in order to digest its food, if nothing else. And when we are keeping ourselves warm, we take in fiery things from our environment. We take in pitta dominant foods. And over the time, the people who have kept the warmest have been able to survive better. So we start to have a prevalence of pitta in our culture. So that's the kind of how this has naturally occurred. When there is a prevalence of anything, though, it can quickly form an excess. And where an excess comes, we start to get an imbalance. And I think it's quite significant that we are in a culture of high pitta, because pitta, fire, is the most dominant element. So wherever there is a little bit of pitta, it can become very big very fast. So if you start a very small fire in your house, it can burn your house down very quickly. So what's happened in our culture is what maybe started as a natural development has turned into a dominant lifestyle, which perhaps isn't very healthy. So what do we see in a pitta dominant society? We see capitalism. Pitta is like a rocket. So if you have natural pitta in your birth state, you will know this, you will relate to this to some extent. You know, you want to get to the next point as fast as you can, and as efficiently as you can. And there's a clear point that you're heading to. And you're usually on some kind of a ladder. You want to get to the top. You want to keep moving up. You don't want to go onto another ladder. This is your ladder, and you're striving to move forward. So we kind of get this idea with capitalism and the growth mentality. So every company wants to grow their business, wants to grow their gross amount of money they're making per year, They just want to keep growing. And at some point, we've kind of lost the thing that we're actually growing for. So why are we keeping growing? Why are we keeping going up the ladder? No one really can give you an answer, but we know that we have to just keep doing it. That's what our society has kind of convinced us. The wealth and status then becomes a form of value, and one of the only forms of value in our kind of Pitta dominant culture. So if we don't belong in that group, if we don't feel like that is how we want to live, or we don't feel like that is natural to us, we quickly get pushed aside. And we see that in some very important jobs that we overlook, such as anyone in the caring sector, underpaid, undervalued. We see that with nurses, healthcare professionals. We see that with carers and teachers. We see that with charity workers. So you might go into this job thinking, oh yes, this is meaningful, this is like me. But even in the charity sector, we're still working 9 to 5. We're still working these really long hours. So we're still in the Pitta culture. Even when we're trying to do something that we love, we're still working really, really hard, because Pitta culture is work hard, play hard, work. So what else do we get from this? We get quite a sort of toxic masculinity. We get a violence, we get an aggression, we get a lack of emotional intelligence. So intelligence is important to Pitta, but it's a certain type of intelligence. So when Pitta comes in excess, we're demanding that intelligence of everyone. This is the intelligence that we know. So you need to be kind of mathematically smart, logical, and rational. And emotions, they don't have a place here. They're soft, they're weak. So, these lovely kind of really kind of kapha and sometimes vata kind of qualities, completely smushed and overlooked. We also get, a lot of kind of body consciousness. So how does this relate to what we're talking about today? Well, Pitta as a dosha finds it fairly easy to have a kind of certain set body shape, because Pitta in the body lives as in the digestive fire, as well as in other sites, and we'll go into that further in future sessions. But because Pitta lives in the digestive fire, Pitta people, Pitta dosha, often have quite high digestive fire. So we have a kind of naturally capable and high metabolism. This can go over the top and become IBS, something like that. But usually it means that Pitta people find it quite easy to get up in the morning, get motivated, and also just digest anything they eat quite easily, quite simple. So Pitta dominance means they look on others and they say, why can't you all do the same? You should all look like me. They like to exercise, they like to move, they like to push themselves, they like competition, and all of that involves kind of this certain physique, this certain look. And furthermore, Pitta also lives in the eyes. So this is a site of Pitta in the body. We all have Pitta in our eyes. That's how our eyes function. But if we're Pitta dosha and if we're dominant in that, it means that observatory sense is extra important. So there's extra emphasis on it. And that means that, if you're just a Pitta person, you might really appreciate luxurious things. You might appreciate very beautiful things around you. As a society, it means we appreciate looks above a lot of other things. So again, this feeds into that kind of body image. It's very much about body image. It's very much about how you present yourself. And, have money, have a nice house, have a nice car, look good. And kind of everything to the extreme as well. So good and bad, us and them, winners and losers. It's kind of very ragistic trait, which is the kind of mental capacity of Pitta tends to be more ragistic. And in Ayurveda, ragistic means desiring, want, need. So you're constantly wanting more. And even we can see this in colonialism. So we can see that what's happened with the kind of Pitta dominant societies in Europe, in the US, we've gone and we've collected things from across the world. So we've gone to other places and we've taken stuff. Oh, this is ours to take. We need to have more stuff. We need to take it and we need to dominate. So we see that kind of on a global scale as well. we are developing in that Pitta way. So we're developing, we're a developed country in the eyes of Pitta. So we're collecting more things, we're getting more money. Whereas other cultures might be developing in an emotional way, or in a more Kapha dominant way, perhaps, more in their relationships, their understanding of each other. And yeah, so when we start talking about this Pitta dominance, what does that mean? It means that we do get a suppression of Vata, and we do get an aggravation of both Pitta and Vata. So how does this look? Well, Kapha suppression, we're suppressing the people who won't go along with that normal kind of Pitta dominant idea of keep going on the ladder. Kapha dosha doesn't tend to want to do that. Kapha dosha likes to make a beautiful home and look after those that are close to them. Kapha dosha loves to be around people and be kind and gentle. Kapha dosha likes to not that interested in being really driven at work, not that interested, just interested in creating a really lovely, comforting environment for themselves and, most importantly, for those loved ones around them. So what does this mean? When we have Pitta domination, Kapha feels like they are not good enough. So Pitta dominates, and Pitta saying, why aren't you moving? Why are you slow? Why are you not trying to get to the moon? Like, we're all moving that way. Why are you staying at home? Why are you doing this thing? Why do you not care? And you also get that kind of with our body image as well. So Kapha might tend towards having a kind of stronger body. And we do talk about this a little bit more in future sessions, if you're confused about why that might be. Kind of stronger, firmer, and form. And tends to have like a slower pace at life, prefers a gentler place, really likes to have lovely meals and food with loved ones, and doesn't like really fast movement, doesn't like loads and loads of salads or just little bits of things, likes to have a really nice comforting environment. And for Pitta, who's kind of the opposite of this, they look at that and we say, oh no, this is wrong. And what the word that we start to attribute to it is lazy. So we call Kapha lazy. And so we take this gentle softness, we take this loveliness, this that thing that we desperately need. It's the ground we walk upon, it's the water that nourishes us, it's the earth and the water characteristic. But we just take it for granted. We walk along the earth to get to the place we want to get, but we never see the earth beneath us. We drink the water, but we never see its quality and see what it's doing to the body. So we just really look down on that dosha. We think, oh, they're boring, they're lazy, they're they eat too much, they don't care about things that matter, like progressing at work and getting more money. We also get this Vata aggravation. So Vata is very good at actually not eating. So we start to talk about food a little bit here because Vata's qualities, there's lots of great qualities, very creative, very great socially, great at connecting with people, good at talking, love to talk, very innovative, really makes a fantastic part of a team, but is a bird, doesn't want to go to the moon, wants to try everything on earth, try all the things. So again, not necessarily on that Pitta ladder. So then we're thinking, how do I fit in as a Vata person when everyone else is trying to climb the ladder and I don't feel like that's me? I might push myself too. We're all trying to push ourselves to fit in a lot of the time. But one of Vata's forms of doing that, which they can achieve, is to be thin. Vata can be thin. Vata can skip meals and it won't even bother them. A Vata imbalance, whereas a Kapha imbalance might go towards more kind of emotional eating, a Vata imbalance will go towards not eating. So Vata finds it very, very easy to lose all their weight and become nothing almost, you know. So that's what Vata can do. Incredibly aggravating for Vata. That is not a healthy state for Vata at all. But one thing they can win at, when Pitta seems to be winning at everything else, is they can be the thinnest. So we get a really sort of damaging message here for Vata, and a damaging way of living. And, you know, Vata can go into obsession, OCD, and it's all about sort of having some kind of control over themselves. You know, Pitta's out there and it's pushing. Pitta's very dominant towards Vata. It's pushing them in a cage, and Vata's saying, how do I stay in control? What can I do? I cannot eat. I can do this exercise every single day like this. You know, these obsessions can form very easily. And, you know, we also see that health and caring and, you know, intuitive eating and, you know, going with the seasons, all these natural things that we really need all the dosha present for, are just not important in our society. We go 9 to 5 every day throughout the winter, throughout the summer, throughout the spring. And we don't take into account our cycles as women. We don't take into account the moon cycles and the cycles of the earth. You know, it's just one rule fits all, and this is Pitta dominance. Just keep going, keep working. And this is really damaging for us for so many reasons, but particularly because we're not going on with those natural rhythms of earth. So we might come into a certain season, and like in the winter, we all feel very depressed or low. No wonder, because we're meant to be resting. We're meant to be kind of taking on these kapha qualities and using them, utilizing them, but we still got Pitta all around us. So yeah, it really does form a lot of issues. So before we kind of move on into some of the history about Fatphobia, let's talk a little bit about just some definitions. So Fatphobia is a fear of or negative attitudes towards fatness and or large-bodied people, and bias and discrimination based in this fear or negative attitude. We might talk about sizeism. Sizeism, very similar. Discrimination, bias, or unequal treatment based on body size. Weight bias or weight discrimination, so bias against people in larger bodies, and discrimination or unequal treatment based on that bias. And fat shaming, the action or practice of humiliating someone judged to be fat or overweight by making mocking or critical comments about their size. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go into some of the history of fatness in our culture. And I will be using the term fat to describe people. And that is essentially the descriptive word I've chosen because of all the research that I've done, the reading that I've done, has suggested that a lot of the other words we use are very much medicalized. So fat has become a negative word, but it is a descriptive word and it can kind of be reclaimed. When you're obviously speaking to somebody living in a larger body, obviously be mindful of what word they want to choose, what word they want to use. Maybe don't describe them at all, you know, unless they're comfortable for you to and they've asked for that. So be completely mindful of what they feel is right. But just for the purposes of these sessions, I'll be using the term fat. And when we're going through this history, you can start to think about the links with the dosha as well. So from what I've just said on the societal basis, we can start to put that into action in what's actually happened on a historical basis. So for many years, there were famines and food shortages. That meant that fat was actually seen as really positive for many, many years. So this is quite a new phenomenon. Because we store fat in our, you know, as energy, this was really, really important for a lot of human development and was often the difference between life and death. It was actually only the end of the 18th century when it really started to be seen as bad. So first, I just want to note some kind of more positive descriptions and depictions of fat. So as I said, early people, you know, we really did admire fatness. We needed to use the whole animal, and fat would be extracted as much as possible. People used it for their light, to kind of burn candles, they used it for clothes, they used it for medicines, and they saw that fat as surrounding the internal organs as actually having kind of mystical qualities. Ice Age peoples linked fatness to survival, and fat was very much worship state. And the kind of aesthetic value and cultural significance attached to fatness is reflected in the really like beautiful nude female figures of Stone Age Europe, dating back to sometimes 20,000 years ago. And these were considered to be the matriarchal icons of fertility and the mother goddesses. The best known of these earliest representations was actually this one on your far left. And this is known as the Venus of Willendorf. And that's because it was discovered in Willendorf in Australia in 1908. And yeah, that's a really nice depiction on one of these kind of goddess-like images. In the Bible, we have loads and loads of images of food and eating, because there was so much famine and shortage around that time. This was always seen as a positive thing. And the Garden of Eden was full of milk and honey. You know, heaven was meant to be a plentiful place. And it was a very, very important part of the Bible in which every single important biblical event would be held with food. And we still to this day, across cultures, use food as an offering to gods. So really important. And famine and food shortage being a killer for so long, by the 18th century, technology had started to get better, and we were able to procure food from farming in a better way, in an easier way. And it meant people had a bit more leisure time and started to put on weight. And at that time, still, like start of 18th century, it was really, really positive, because we were actually increasing our lifespan. The philosopher Thomas Aquinas saw fatness as a sign of monumentality, so as power. So you actually get a real difference, because now it's very much the opposite. You know, powerful people see fat as like not okay, whereas yeah, very much a sign of power at that time. And we can actually see fatness in a lot of the Renaissance art, especially in Michelangelo's work. We can see it in Paul Rubens' work. So you can see these pictures in the middle. This was just a kind of very normal images of women in the Renaissance kind of era. And I think Rubens even described that an attractive woman's body is the hip or tips of the thighs, and the thighs themselves should be large and ample. The buttocks should be round and fleshy, the knees should be fleshy and round. He also had some questionable beliefs about whiteness. So he, you know, some of the kind of racist ideals were started during that time. But, you know, we do see, at least from this, that fatness was admired. And you can even see similar attitudes in the literature around that time, with Shakespeare's sort of Falstaff, where he is a, you know, very jolly kind of character, whereas actually you compare that to the thin characters who are very miserable, like Hamlet. And we can even see that in our present day with stories like Father Christmas, who is, you know, jolly and happy, in comparison to Scrooge, who is sort of skinny and angry and sad. And yeah, we can even see that with past American presidents such as Hoover, Taylor, Grant, Cleveland, whose larger sizes were sort of representative of prosperity and strength and health, whereas now we see kind of a lot of presidents coming out with kind of health campaigns against fatness. We actually saw, even in the medical industry throughout the 19th and even into the 20th century, professionals were saying that 20 to 50 extra pounds of excess fat was healthy and necessary for vitality and long life. and being thin was unhealthy. And therefore there was really an emphasis on how to gain weight rather than how to lose it. We can even compare this to cultures across the world, even though I'll mainly be focusing on the kind of Western culture that we belong to in these presentations. We can definitely see across the world in, for example, the fat Buddha, who was modeled on a monk at the time, who was really generous and kind, and they portrayed him as fat because they link these qualities to fatness: generous and kindness and happiness. And we can kind of see, it is all stereotypes, but we can kind of see this more positive stereotype as there is a kind of link there with the natural kapha dosha, who we do see to kind of exhibit a lot more gentleness and kindness and happiness and softness and that kind of caring motherly nature than comparative to the other doshas. So we do kind of see that link to some extent. Yeah, so now I'll be talking through the racist, the classist, and the sexist origins of fat phobia. Obviously, they really do all interlink. So you'll see the links as I talk through them. They're very not just kind of on their own. They very much link to each other. So the ancient Greeks, fat started actually being associated with animals around that time because they were fattening animals. So they'd fatten animals to butcher and kill and eat. So they started to see that people who are fat is like, oh, it's a kind of animal characteristic. Like those people are there to be conquered, almost. By the kind of 18th century, we actually had like a lot of kind of white Europeans kind of going off to other places, colonizing everywhere, and bringing people back. So actually, enslaving people already and bringing people back over to kind of look at. And obviously to work as slaves as well at that time. But some of the first Africans to come over were people kind of dragged over by these white men to parade them around European towns. So one of these famous ones is this image up in the right corner, and this is an very unrealistic image that they've painted of a woman called Sarah Bartman. I assume she was named Sarah Bartman. And she is known as the Hottentot Venus. That's actually an offensive word now. It's actually, she's a member of the Khoi people, but that's what they called it at the time. And she was kind of held up as everything that a woman should avoid being. So they'd parade her around like a kind of freak show. And it was kind of as a way of so for upper class white women to kind of compare themselves and say, like, oh gosh, that's the way we don't want to be, that woman. So they really just objectified her. It was it was really horrendous. And the Europeans had very little exposure to what was going on in the rest of the world. So if they saw this one woman, then they'd be like, right, that's how Africans are. And there's a lot of kind of different examples of this happening. And she became really popularized as kind of how Black women are. And people kind of started attributing Black women with being constitutionally thick-set, and that this was evidence of their savagery. While middle and upper class were starting to get thinner purposely to show that they were different. So we start getting this separatism, us and them. So, it's much easier to enslave people if you see them as savage and you see them as other. And, even animal, because we've got that link with the butchery of animals and fatness. So, as you can see, in the lead up to slavery, this has become really, really useful. Blackness and animals and savagery. And white people were really using anything they could to differentiate themselves away from this. especially the kind of upper classes. Race scientists were emerging at this time, and race scientists were starting to try and differentiate against the races. This is when kind of races first existed. So we established the races essentially in these kind of Western countries. And race scientists were claiming, like people like Buffon, he was claiming that unlike Europeans, Africans lacked intellectual or moral capacity for rational self-discipline, hence why they will all be fat. Rather, they were given to indulging in the basest vices of the flesh, food, and sex. So you can start to see this pitta dominant society as well roll in, you know, this kind of obsession with taking, you know, getting out of the body and into the mind. You know, it's all just about these intellectual pursuits and you know, getting more and knowing more. And you know, if you relate to the body at all, if you want to enjoy the like sensual pleasures, you are a kind of animal. Like you're not like how you should be in this kind of European upper class. So, as I said, white women were then encouraged to slim down. And we even see the fear of the imagined fat Black woman. We can even see these ideologies kind of used right into the present day with kind of ideas of like the welfare mother. You know, we still see this stereotype, the angry, you know, we still see the stereotype of this kind of really different body, this very different thing from these European upper classes in their mind. They even actually did this to some extent to the Irish. So there was even a point where they blamed the potato famine on Irish people being actually not like other Europeans. Irish people were seen as to be to have origins in Asia and Africa. And they said that because of this, they're very greedy and they actually just ate all their potatoes. And yeah, they ate all their own potatoes. So that was why they had that famine. So basically anything they could do to prove moral inferiority. Now, of course, you actually have a link with eating disorders here, because all of these things that we're talking about cause really deep-seated trauma, even in present-day Black people who have got this in their ancestry. So we see real, like deep-seated inherited trauma that can very easily lead to kind of difficult relationships with food and eating disorders, among many, many other things. And now I'll talk about the classist roots of fatphobia. I'll just let you kind of sit with that information for a moment. I'll have a drink. So thinness did start becoming a sign of the upper classes. So we've already kind of talked about the start of why that might be. It was in ancient Greek and Roman society when this happened. And some of it happened by the way of famous philosophers that we know to this day, like Plato and Socrates, among others, who sort of started to suggest that fullness of the stomach led to dullness of the mind. So there was these views already forming that we've talked about kind of domesticated, fattened people like the animals. And yeah, Plato, Socrates, Aristotle start really attributing this to people who were like animals because they only experienced sort of sensual pleasures, which made them kind of dull and stupid. And being fat began to represent a life without aspiration. So, you know, somebody was morally soft, they said. I mean, what does that compare to? Being really hard and angry, being cruel to others, perhaps, but you know, that was very much seen as a good thing, and I mean, to this day is. Socrates himself was fat. His followers, however, did not see the link between fatness and stupidity, because fatness was forgiven because of his wisdom. So generally, although there was these very negative ideas coming out at this time, there was a long period of ambiguity related to fatness as well during this time. So, one sec. So Aquinas even said that fatness in men equaled infertility. So his idea was food creates blood, and it was believed that women turned the blood into milk and used it to make, but men used it to make semen. But instead of this, it went to fat. And even in Ireland, there was actually a law passed that women could divorce men if they were fat, because it would obviously mean they were infertile. So very strange stuff going on here. And yeah, fat started to be believed to be a cushioning layer around the brain that avoided sensation, dulling perception. By the Middle Ages, we see this like term fat head used, which is a layer around the head preventing ideas from getting to the brain. And with the emergence of Christianity, we actually see an increasing emphasis on the soul and the afterlife, whereas fatness was starting to represent the kind of heaviness and being bound to the earth. So you couldn't get to the afterlife if you were fat. And Protestantism further encouraged people to separate their physical body from the perfection awaiting them in afterlife. And they just saw like earthly heavy bodies as the lowest common denominator. There was even a Dominican priest who suggested that cities close their gates to fat people and that fat children should be exiled. Jesus, you can see, is always portrayed as very slim. That's seen as kind of godly. And so are all the saints, they've all got this really set ideal physique. During the Enlightenment, that actually changed the way we viewed fatness further. So in the Enlightenment, we see the real emergence of the middle class. And there was kind of an emphasis on self-containment, self-improvement. Clothes helped them to elevate to this as well. And weights and measures were also standardized. So people at this point could actually start quantifying their bodies and comparing themselves to each other, to past versions of themselves. Now, when we take this to the present, we know that actually this is still a classist issue to this day. So economic resources are very much required to maintain like the classic kind of wellness lifestyle. And being thin is a symbol of privilege very much. Fast food and fatness have become associated with a lower income. There's overweight poor are kind of fat shamed, overweight because even though you might be overweight or fat, if you're wealthy, it's not going to mean the same things for you. If you're working class and fat, then you will have a much kind of higher amount of fat shaming, and there's lots of research proving that. And you're going to just be attributed to those negative attitudes that we've already seen develop, such as laziness. And essentially, it is a lazy justification for laughing at larger people simply because they do not have the same privileges as the rich. So people are blamed for their fatness and their poverty in one fell swoop. David Cameron actually said he actually accused people who were in his kind of obese category of unwilling to accept help. And parents are directly blamed for their children's overconsumption and inactivity. Even Professor Dame Carol Black horrifically suggested that we strip people of their benefits if they don't comply with weight loss treatment. So they're kind of blamed for their lack of economic resources, so not being able to like fit into this kind of wellness lifestyle bubble. And they're also then blamed for their fatness. And all the while, if you're in kind of the middle classes and you're a man, you're allowed to be fat, no one really looks, that's absolutely fine, no problem. The fact is, obviously, there's a lot of facts around why there is a little bit more link with fatness and working class. They are, a lot more vulnerable to advertising and being indoctrinated by big companies selling food items. They actually, I couldn't find figures for the UK, but in the US, the BIPOC community are exposed to double load of advertising on both fast food and dietary products. So it's like, what? Obviously, vegetables, especially organic vegetables that actually taste good, are really expensive and, time consuming to prepare and make. And ready meals and value brands are extremely cheap. I liked this quote in the book I read: "The quinoa-centric world of the wellness elite is unfathomably alien to a mother trying to feed her family on a fiver." So I think that was, hit the point. So, these ready meals, processed food also does cause issues with digestion. So then you get this kind of spiral where it's very difficult to then absorb food correctly. And the wealthy middle class are getting all these organic vegetables, all these like wellness products, meaning they can kind of benefit from the positive effects of those. And, poverty and inequality are the very things that exacerbate binge eating and weight gain. So aside from the obvious economic barriers to healthy eating, constant financial anxiety really does take a psychological toll. Poverty and inequality induce people's likelihood to seek high-calorie foods, and a lower income is a huge risk factor in mental health problems too, which can obviously relate to all of these things. And research shows that stress and uncertainty associated with food scarcity makes us attracted to higher calorie foods. And if someone is concerned about being able to afford their next meal, they exist in a climate of psychological and nutritional deprivation. Yeah. There's kind of an emphasis on aspiration as well with the working class. I mean, the classes have created this ideal. The upper class have created this ideal way of being, this picture dominance, this ideal person, this ideal body shape. And so there's kind of this emphasis on the working classes to be aspirational. So you should always aspire to be this way. And, you just have to keep pushing yourself until you are. And you kind of do have some damaging people, sometimes celebrities, who have been working class themselves and have, for some reason, maybe they were under a better government or just got very lucky, have somehow kind of maneuvered themselves into a position of power and maneuvered themselves into a position where they have a lot of money now. And you even see some of these shows, and I think there was a show where I think Gordon Ramsay was on it, and their kids were put in the same lifestyle that they had growing up. So, for example, Gordon Ramsay lived on an estate, and his kid went to live there for a bit. And his kid's obviously from a very different background now that he was from. And he was actually couch surfing with this guy, because that's what Gordon Ramsay did for a while. And he came back to his dad and he said, "What if I told you that I don't think you could survive if you were to be working class now? I don't think you'd have managed to get out of it and managed to get to the position you're in now." And he was like, "Oh no, it's rubbish." So at the same time, you do have those, he said it's rubbish, it's all about merit, you can just get wherever you can, because look at me, I did. So at the same time, you have those aspirational people who are saying, you are lazy and rubbish, because if I could do it, you could, and you're not. So it must be your problem. So you really have that damaging kind of, that kind of aspirational part of it as well. And it is true that the prevalence of being overweight is significantly higher among people of lower social economic status, but eating disorders don't discriminate. However, the system definitely does. Eating disorders treatment is not the same depending on your weight. So if you have a much higher amount of working class people being fat, then they're not actually going to get treated in the same way for eating disorders either. And this is because if you're living in a fat body, you will get completely ignored a lot of the time if you try and go with any medical problem, so it seems, but also eating disorders. So you will not be diagnosed with a lot of eating disorders until you're below a certain BMI. You know, a lot of people just get sent away. Eating disorders are just not treated in any way the same in a fat body as in a thin body. So all of that really desperate mental health support that you need, you are very unlikely to receive if you live in a fat body. I'll let you sit with that for a moment. And then we're going to just take on board all of those things that we've just thought about, because they all relate to sexism as well. When we're talking about this, we're talking about women because men, because of the patriarchy, they have decided the rules a lot of the time. So, you know, it's these philosophers deciding about these ideals. It's the kind of medical system which started off as entirely men, you know, deciding these ideals. It's even the fashion magazines like Harper's Bazaar, Cosmopolitan, which are all male owned initially anyway. Hopefully that's not the case now, I'm not sure. Please do tell me if you know. Yeah, so it's all of these fashion magazines which actually they're putting out certain messages. It was even, I can't remember the name of the book, but it was a woman's book, which is the first ever book for women, little magazine for women, written by a man, and that was the first ever book to start talking about being thin and dieting. So, you know, men forever have told women how to be, and it's based on the patriarchy. It's based on the system where women are objectified. Women are meant to be submissive. Women are there for their looks. Women are there to hang on the side of a man, but they're not there to actually have any self-respect, really, or be able to have autonomy in their life. So within this, we see thinness as showing self-control, which feeds into the narrative that women should be controllable and submissive. Women's bodies are public property, and so therefore they should look a certain way. Fat phobia has always caused more problems for women, so has eating disorders. White women, as we saw in the earlier slide, white upper class women are expected to serve as a reminder of kind of good moral and righteousness, and even links with the Bible. You know, you are closer to evil if you indulged in pleasurable things. We see Adam and Eve here. You know, Eve ate the apple, that kind of condemned women forever. Humankind, but she did it, not him. You are close to evil if you indulge in these pleasurable things like food and sex, with innate wants and needs labeled as sin. And thinness became like a very perfect aesthetic for women, because it means we can fade into the background of political and societal systems. Literally, with a thinner body, we are taking up less space. We are meant to be just in the corner. We're not meant to take up space. Interestingly, with the second wave of feminism after the Second World War, this did not help our food culture. So, although obviously a very important thing, women left the kitchen at this time saying, actually, we want to work. We were working all through the war. We want to carry on working. We realized that actually we can do it. It's not that hard. And we can kind of do it better than you a lot of the time. But instead of men taking up their fair share of this labor, just at the same time, ready meals were really getting big and were invented and became popularized. And essentially, this advantaged white men again, who were the owners of these companies. So men could carry on working, women could work too, but there was an additional group of white men benefiting from ready meal production and consumption. And also at this time, you know, our food culture really went downhill, because before then, you know, at least we had kind of home cooked meals because of the patriarchal system. But you know, at this time we all collectively stopped cooking, and stopped being able to pass that skill on slowly. You know, we can probably remember that our grandma might be able to cook, but you know, future generations won't maybe have that either. And you know, we started to just really consume ready meals and fast food on a much bigger basis. And again, this does also fit into the pitta ideal, because if we look at the pitta mentality, we see that there's this obsession with work, this obsession with production, this obsession with capitalism and feeding this capitalist machine. And what was happening was, instead of actually saying, oh, you know, should we just all make everything a little bit more equal, and men, you stay home a bit more, because that'll probably make your life a little bit less pitta, and you know, bring in these nice elements into your life, bring a more balanced life to you. But I'm also going to go out to work and bring these balanced elements into my life. I'm not just going to be this and you be that. And also, work is valued. So why would I want to be doing something that isn't valued by my society that I live in? Of course I want to be valued. The problem is, work was the only thing that was valued. So all that home stuff wasn't valued at all after that. And before that, you know, because women were just part of that devalued system. But now women wanted their value and they were asking for their value. We were having to just fit into this pitta ideal, because that's the only way of us getting value. So along with doing that, it's like, now we live in a society where food is just fuel, you know, just eat at your desk, eat as fast as you can, and then feel guilty about it. And then also have digestive issues because you weren't relaxed while you were eating. Also have digestive issues and you know, a lot of health issues because actually you're eating ready meals and processed food most of the time. And also completely lose your connection with your food. So even in other parts of Europe, that hasn't happened. So we still see in like France and Germany and Italy, you know, Spain, a lot of like deep rooted food culture where they still a lot of the time will sit around their table and eat these beautiful meals and you know, really enjoy their food with each other. And that kind of connection with food, like that brings us to that connection with nature still. You know, food is nature and nature is food. So we're still having that lovely like connection with each other over a meal that we celebrate together. In this pitta dominant society where we've kind of forgotten how to cook as well, and we don't value that skill in any way, we're eating at our desks, we're eating loads of rubbish food, you know, we actually lose that connection with earth as well. So we can lose the connection with real food because we're not eating it, and we lose the connection with food because we're not enjoying it. We're not having any joy. We're sitting around you know, a computer or a desk trying to just eat a sandwich. So no wonder, you know, we actually have a really high prevalence of eating disorders, because we just can't connect with our food in the same way, and therefore we can't enjoy it. Therefore we you know, we feel like it's kind of a sin, we feel like it's a bad thing. We're taught that food's a fuel, and or you just shouldn't really have it. So it's kind of better if you're not eating. You know, as thin as you want to be, there will still be a talk about dieting. Like, you should always be losing more weight. Doesn't matter what weight you're at, you should always be dieting. You should always be fasting and not eating. And, you know, all of this stuff is rooted in what we're talking about. You know, still to this day, we should not be going along with our sensual pleasures. That's still a sin somehow. That's still kind of wrong. And you shouldn't really enjoy your food. Like, you shouldn't be, you know, somebody who likes food. I actually, just on a personal note, before we move on, I remember that being maybe one of my triggers when I had an eating disorder. I remember feeling like so bizarre because I just loved food and I knew that it wasn't right. I knew it was not right to like food. We shouldn't like food. We're not allowed to like food, but I really like it. So there must be something wrong with me. So I need to just get control over myself. You know, like what a weird idea. Like that's so damaging. So I'm actually gonna kind of draw to a close here. And just for this session. And I want to talk a little bit about what we'll be discussing in the next sessions. And then I want to give you some reflection questions and just ask you, anything that you thought. And if you are on a recording, please do feel free to send us emails about your thoughts. Like we'd really like to hear that. So in the next session, we will be looking at diet culture a little bit more. We'll be looking at the effects of diet propaganda. We'll be looking at, the assumptions about fatness in our present day. And we'll be looking at the BMI system, how it came to be, and the kind of some different movements like body positivity and, some critiques of that. So that's what we'll be doing next time. And just for now, I'm going to ask you, only if you're comfortable thinking about this. Some people might have traumatic pasts with food and their body, and maybe it's not helpful for you to think about that, and that's completely valid. And just, reflect on that yourself. Do I want to think about this? Do I not? Is that going to be helpful for me? And if not, do just leave it alone. But otherwise, if that's not you, I am curious, what is your food and body story? Start to have a think about messages you received from your family growing up. Are there aspects of your family culture or background that has affected how you live today? And do these link with a wider societal ideals or prejudices? So start to have a think about those. And I will stop the share. And I will stop the recording.